All right. Hey there. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're viewing from. I guess it could even be good evening, right? But it's good morning here still. Chris Franks with Texas West Capital. I've got the boys, Tillman and Andrew, sitting in the back, getting ready to come on here with us. We're going to talk Bitcoin as always. But before we do us a favor, y'all. Takes 2 seconds. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like. Follow us. You can follow me at TX West Capital on X. You can follow Tillman at Texas OL61, and you can follow Andrew at AP_Abacus. So make sure you're following us, like posts, comments, stuff like that. By the way, when you leave comments on these videos here, it really does help the algorithm. So it helps other people find us as well. And we would love for y'all to do that because we're coming out swinging, guys, every day. And so today we're going to talk about not only is Bitcoin's price going up, and that's a great thing, but man, fundamentals are looking good. Bitcoin miners look like they probably have a good chance of having bottomed now. We've got the Trump pump, if you think that's something there. You've got Larry Fink coming out saying that Bitcoin will potentially be the size, or he believes it'll become the size of the housing market here in the U.S. Just so much kind of great stuff going on. ETFs having just boomer inflows there, and I don't mean just from boomers. But anyway, so a lot of great stuff going on there. So always good to see you guys joining in with us. I switched the guys around here. We were switched around earlier, so now Andrew's in the middle. He's the focal point. And
of course, as it should be. As it should be, right? I mean, as it should be.
It's the ego perfectly. So, hey, man, how are you guys doing, man? Love doing this every week. What are you guys up to?
Oh, we're doing great. I'm loving the price action. It's always fun to see everybody in a good mood, regardless of the fact that our beloved Bitcoin is not on sale anymore. But yeah, no, I'm doing great over here.
Well, and as we always point out, when it's on sale, that's the time you should be excited about when it's on sale, right? But we know
guess who doesn't care? Guess who doesn't care if it's on sale or not? Larry Fink doesn't care. He does not care. He does not care. They've done almost $500 million in inflows over the last 2.5 days, and no problem. Which is kind of par for the course. When something gets hot, that's when retail rushes in, yep. Right? So people are shoveling money into the IBIT product and then to the Bitcoin ETFs overall. My guess is when flows are calculated for today, we'll be up over $1 billion for this week, just in 3 days.
Nice.
And that's substantial. Those are the biggest numbers since early June.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's it's as expected, right? So sell in May and go away ended a month ago. And so we've seen the ramp up. And we're also seeing some catch up as it relates to performance associated with these products. Wall Street is kind of a copycat sort of type of environment. If something is working and you don't have it on your proverbial balance sheet and you're having client meetings and they're like, wait a minute, the other guy that I use is really doing well in this. Why isn't it? Where's it in my portfolio here? Yeah. And so you've got to, check all the boxes or your money gets moved to somebody else. So copycat Wall Street is a real thing. And I was on Spaces earlier with Crypto Town Hall, and I always want to make sure that we find a way to get out of the bubble that we are in, which is crypto and Bitcoin and whatnot. The fact that we have nearly $60 billion in the Bitcoin ETFs currently, right? $60 billion in totality is mind-blowing. Then on top of that, if you remove the S&P and the NASDAQ ETF categories, Bitcoin is hundreds of miles ahead of every other category of ETFs this year in terms of net inflows. Yeah. So net inflows will pass 20 billion here probably in the next week or so. And that's a huge number. That is a huge number. You have to go back years and years and years to find a category that even remotely approaches that in a 9-month period. Yeah. It is historic. It's not often that you get to have historic conversations.
Well, what were the max I think we were looking at back in January? It wasn't anywhere near that, right? We were looking at for the year.
5 billion,
Yeah.
some people that were insane. Like I was considered insane that I thought it would be 10 billion, and it's double that in 9 months.
It's absolutely crazy.
It's unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. So, yeah, Bitcoin isn't going anywhere. And, there's a reason why BlackRock and Larry Fink have turned into Bitcoin shills. They're just talking their book.
Yeah.
Right? They're just talking their book. It makes them money,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're in the business of selling the shovels, right?
Yeah.
Money at that level is about control. They don't have to own the asset to control it, right? No different than the way they control pension funds, right? And everything that goes along with controlling pension funds. It's when you're like, I see this as them seeing a response in the market and them responding accordingly. Like that's business. That's 101. It's like, holy cow, a lot of people like this. And holy cow, this is a new product that we have kind of a monopoly on and such a head start on. Like between the what, 7 of us, the biggest ones, we can control Bitcoin. And they will, right? That's the vacuum cleaner effect that's happening right now, is that like kind cash purchased Bitcoin on the form of an ETF means that BlackRock's holding somebody's Bitcoin, which isn't a bad thing if you want global adoption. It is a bad thing if you want this to be decentralized.
Decentral what? but also let's make sure everybody understands, because I'm still seeing this, in social media. I'm still seeing posts where they're saying BlackRock owns so much Bitcoin, and they hold it, but they don't own it. Remember, guys, whenever you sell out of IBIT or any of these ETF guys, they have to sell the Bitcoin. They don't just hold it there and say, oh, well, here's some money. They have to actually sell. It has to go through the process of being sold and whatnot. So it isn't that, BlackRock actually holds, that owns all this. They're just holding it for the people who own it in the ETF.
Yeah, it's a simple head count. They're literally going, oh man, lots of people want to buy this. Oh, we should probably promote it and talk about it and serve those people. And it injects, as we all know, if you've touched Bitcoin, you know how it injects a level of hope and excitement into your financial, outlook.
Yeah.
I think they're seeing that and they're feeling it and they're a part of it now. And the more we get from a buy-in perspective, the things that I look at that make me the most excited is, statistical anomalies. And one of the things that we're approaching is called price discovery.
Yeah.
It's where an asset doesn't know what its price is and it has to find it. And it's searching in the dark because it's never been there before. And so things get wild. It's like watching the most aggressive bull riding that exists on the planet. And that's exciting because why? Because it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And it may happen this cycle, it may not happen. We may peter out. I don't know the future, but I can tell you, that all of the volume looks positive to me. The constant volume, the buying volume that always comes with retirement accounts and big money managers like BlackRock. And so they're playing a much longer game than this cycle, guys. I mean, that's the thing that just keeps, like, they don't care about the next 3 years.
Yeah.
They want to look in the next 10 years and go, we were first, and look at, we're the king of the hill. And that is where the holy grail of it becoming as large as real estate. But again, like, if you want to read some pretty solid tea leaves here, if he's saying, Larry Fink, now Michael Saylor has said that Bitcoin is going to provide yield. But I would say that Larry Fink said the exact same thing without saying it, because if it's going to be as big as real estate, you better believe it's going to provide yield, and you better believe it's going to be borrowable at every bank across America. Period. The end. So in my mind, if I hear Larry Fink's, vision, he's thinking banks you're going to be able to take a cold storage wallet to the corner bank, any of them, and onboard Bitcoin into insurance-backed, lended, interest-bearing accounts for those deposits. That's the
That's
only
so incredible.
logical conclusion that I can come up with based upon what he said. So, like Andrew said, all things a go. Let's
Well, Tillman
systems
made a
go.
great point privately to me yesterday. There's only one place where you could pull that off. There's only one place. There's only one approved, provided, regulated, all that stuff place where you can do that business. And where is it, Tillman? Say it for me.
You say it. You brought it up.
It's at banks. Here in the United States, it's at banks. You can't you can't provide yield on an asset anywhere other than banks. Why?
Well, exactly. The punchline is this: that yield legally, like you can't offer it. There's a lot of laws that protect consumers from yield bearing assets, lots. And if you say you're providing a yield, there's a hoop or two that you've jumped through, no matter what offering it looks like. So if you're going to offer universal yield allowance against Bitcoin deposits, who's regulated in that form and fashion to be the onboarding gate for tens of millions of Americans that want a safe place to put their Bitcoin, to earn interest, and to have borrowing capabilities against it? You open those doors up tomorrow, and it's a reverse run on the bank.
Yeah. And so thinking about that, and thinking about these possibilities, right? Phil Baswani's got a question. He says the SPDR is around 400 billion. Does Bitcoin catch this eventually?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, SPDR is one individual ETF. If I'm not mistaken, is that correct?
Yeah.
Somebody looked that up for me. So I don't think BlackRock's, IBIT catches the S&P 500 at 400 billion. But if it gets halfway there, I mean, if it gets, it is, these numbers, where Bitcoin price will be is it melts faces, right? Just a note. What's interesting about the comments that Fink made. First of all, those comments were made on BlackRock's earnings call.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, this isn't just some goofy little spot he's doing on Fox Business with Charlie Gasparino. He's responsible for the comments on the earnings call, like legally, right?
Yeah.
So the commentary associated with, Bitcoin is an asset class. And then he very quickly pivoted and compared the rise and scale of the rise of mortgages as an asset class. Well, what did Wall Street do with mortgages as that asset class rose? It mushroom ballooned that asset class and injected it with as many steroids as the world has ever seen.
Real estate has made more millionaires than any asset class that's ever been created in the history of mankind.
Right.
And some would argue is that the mastery of what Andrew just discussed has actually been the economic driver behind the United States' dominance over the last 30 years. Because technology is great, right? If you discover something, AI is a great example of that. Whoever, from a country perspective, dominates AI will reap the benefits financially as well. But in the lulls of innovation, what asset allows you more borrowing function inside of an economy? Real estate does. I mean, that's a no-brainer. And if you have somebody who's properly built a real estate fortune and they have enough paid off in low tax places with high yield, they're bulletproof. They print money like the US government does because they've mastered the APR game. They borrow cheaper than they're making, and they do it at scale. And that's literally what central banks do with local banks is, hey, we'll let you borrow money at 1%. You can lend it out at 5%. How does that sound? And that local bank is now really incentivized to go find loans because they make 4% on every loan that comes across the table. If you have the real estate game mastered, that's essentially what you're doing. The problem with it is takes a lot of time, and you have to be highly leveraged at some point in that journey. And if you're unlucky and go bust, you start over again and you try it all over again. That's the only real downside. And that's why a lot of like gurus out there talk about how real estate's kind of a no miss game. To some
Yeah.
degree, it kind of is in the United States, as long as we have low interest rates. Like that's the risk. Do you think the U.S. economy can continue to drive inflation, drive money into the market through innovation and dominance? And can we essentially ride that wave with them by borrowing cheap money and making high dollar assets turn into higher dollar assets?
Yeah, and that's the game. And I think one of the best things probably about social media, um, this global interconnectivity stuff like that, is that your average Joe starts learning this now.
Yeah.
If you grew up prior to the internet and whatever, you're kind of just you're stuck with the information around you. You're stuck with your societal place, your socioeconomic place, your friends, your family, and whatnot. And a lot of people don't have access to that kind of knowledge. And so I think, at a broader point, when you look at that and you go, well, rich people are evil. That seems like be this base thing. They need to pay their fair share. Fair share is like one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. It means absolutely nothing. What do you mean fair share? You're talking about, the top 5% pay 97.5% of all taxes, in the U.S., but yet they're not paying their fair share. And there's a lot of jumbling around with this. But when you start becoming financially literate, when you start understanding that, yes, taxes suck. Yes, the IRS sucks, but there is a playbook on how to maximize what you get to keep and how you can use those tax laws to not just minimize what you're paying out, which, by the way, is completely 100% grade A America, to pay as little taxes as you can legally pay. That's why the playbook is there. That's 70, 80,000 plus code book, right? But we don't learn these things. If you grow up in a middle-class family or a poor family, you don't learn these things. And all you have is the talking points by your political pundits and whatnot. It makes you believe the world runs a certain way that it doesn't. And that puts you at a disadvantage. What you're talking about right here, just this little bit that you're mentioning right here, Tillman, about mortgages and how y'all are talking about how this becomes this big, huge thing that spurs on lending, that spurs on all these different activities, these ways to create more wealth. I mean, most people, I would say even today, really don't understand that fully.
Well, I can give it to them very simple in the most layman terms possible. The reason why we call money liquidity is because it's literally like water. It flows energy from one place to another. And so if you look on the earth, where are the biggest cities located? On the rivers. And which rivers? The biggest rivers.
Yep.
Because they can handle commerce. New York City is a perfect example. Like, it's positioned as a harbor because water is that important. And so
Yeah.
when you look at money, look at it like water. If it starts drying up, life can't be supported. Businesses downstream of that river go out of business. Fishermen hundreds of miles away are impacted. That's the same thing with entrepreneurism and business in America, is when you can get cheap money from the bank and pursue your dreams. Right now, America's built on the dream of owning a lot of real estate. That's the American dream, literally. And when you have income producing real estate, it doesn't take a lot of expertise. You don't have to go to school to learn the real estate game. You just have to find somebody that's done it, follow what they do, and start small and grow it. And one acorn leads to a bigger tree, to a bigger tree, and it's one of those things, like the mastery of it. And Einstein said this. He said the laws of compounding, which is basically the time value of money and how much money is worth now versus tomorrow versus next week and what earning potential that has. What's water worth in a river that's flowing by your property? If I own acreage on a river and that river is ripping by my property, it's mine for how long? I don't know,
Forever.
like 15 seconds. No, it rushes past my property. The water's running
Oh, the
past my
water
property.
rush.
But as long as there's enough liquidity, I can siphon off enough to irrigate all my crops, to run a hydro dam through a stored up water container. There's a lot of potential as long as there's enough liquidity in the mainstream. When that mainstream starts to narrow, it doesn't provide enough pressure, doesn't have enough liquidity. So when you're looking at politicians who are talking pro business, when you're looking at politicians who are talking about pro policy, they're talking about unlocking dams of liquidity and
Yeah.
creating new rivers that run through, that create all sorts of ancillary businesses. If a new business props up in Denver, Colorado, and they're buying a building, you're measuring maybe like the direct impact of that business through, direct purchases of cardboard for their boxes and stuff like that. But are you measuring that they hired painters to paint their building? Are you measuring the fact that they've got a storage facility in the city for overflow furniture that they're paying monthly on? Like, there's so much ancillary water that's being siphoned off of a growing business that provides growth to other areas, that if we do that as a country, we're the most powerful, most dominant, because we understand this at a level that no other country does, because this is what capitalism really is, right? Finding inexpensive money and leveraging that into growing assets that produce income, that make the investment at the beginning relatively small. Like that's
Yeah,
that's
I got confused there. I thought that river analogy had something to do with whole life insurance again. I didn't know where that was headed. So my apologies there. I got confused. So yeah. But good analogy nonetheless. Nonetheless.
That's it. You stay on afterwards. You're one of the troubled students that needs.
Brad was asking what you're describing with Fink. I'm pretty sure Sailor is a similar end game with MicroStrategy, yield and such.
Yeah.
That was exactly the point we were getting at. Fink basically saying the same thing without directly saying it was the point there.
Well, Sailor has directly said it. So Sailor over the past 3 months has gone from I'm going to buy as much Bitcoin as have ever existed to, boy, isn't the idea of yield associated with Bitcoin, sound like an interesting concept, to last week, I think MicroStrategy could be the biggest Bitcoin bank that's ever existed and maybe the first one that ever existed. So he went from buy Bitcoin, yield to bank in a nanosecond. Not at all surprising.
Well, that wasn't premeditative, Andrew. Come on, that just came to me.
Yeah.
What are you
talking
about?
Yeah.
He couldn't have possibly had any idea what he was doing back when he started buying in 2020, right?
No,
and have an end game was just to buy.
It's funny, if he does become the largest Bitcoin, he could provide insurance to a certain level that no one else could, which is like-kind Bitcoin deposit reimbursement insurance. You lose my Bitcoin, you give me Bitcoin back. There's not a lot of groups that could say that. I mean, that would be a perk that would get all of the deposits in my mind. I mean, all of them.
Well, I mean, just look at the guys that lost money here with, the last few years there with Voyager and FTX and all that. And they're getting the value of the Bitcoin at the time.
Right,
and they're like, what the hell? I want my Bitcoin back. Well, no, you don't get your Bitcoin back,
Yeah.
Well, Michael is a pirate enough in the industry where I absolutely think he's positioned himself to get at the table, right? He's at the round table of banks that will custody Bitcoin for sure. And he's also driving innovation at that table. He's the leader. No one's a thought leader at that table like him. So he's so far ahead of everybody at that table. The other people at that table have been watching him from afar, like Jamie Dimon. What am I going to do here? A little strategy here, little strategy there. Michael's been full court press. I want to know everything there is to know, which is going to give his bank a distinct advantage in my estimation. And when you talk about advantage in a commodity-based race to the bottom market, that's a huge deal. If you're talking about Jamie Dimon and the likes, you name them, right, are offering 4% for Bitcoin deposits, 5% for Bitcoin deposits, 9%, you're going to go to the highest, right? So it's going to be a race to the proverbial top for them to pay out the highest yield that they can while still remaining profitable.
And we're,
Michael,
well, I was just gonna say, and we're the winners for that.
well, 100% we are, because
Yeah.
it's a finite asset that they want control over. There will be a time where they take control and it will flip and they will start driving those rates down again. But Saylor has a unique advantage in the fact that he already has the Bitcoin. So from day one, he can operate less expensively without additional ancillary insurance. He can self-insure essentially against lost Bitcoin deposits. He knows the protocol so well that he could create the best practices for managing that type of a system better than all of them. So I would envision, just like the crypto space has been on the app development side, on the exchange development side, on the decentralized exchange development side, there'll be a couple of shining stars that pop up early. He'll be one of them. They'll dominate 85% of the market, and over the next decade, their advantage will be watered down, and then hopefully we'll be able to go to every corner bank and deposit Bitcoin for a pretty uniform yield, right? Like the plus or minus 50 basis points.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, realistically, that's what we want. That's what we should want. Otherwise, what are we doing, right? If we don't do that, Bitcoin doesn't go mainstream, and how does it protect you against, inflation? I mean, it's kind of like the catch-20. That unfortunately the maximalists a lot of times don't. They're so stuck on this initial thought of what they thought it should be and where it should be, that they miss out on the real benefit of it.
Well, not only do they not, but they have some blind spots that I don't think strategically they're at the level of sophistication that Larry Fink is at. Let me ask some pretty.
Well, how many of us are, though, really? I mean,
well, very few, but I think that the blind spots are more ego driven than, and group think driven than genius driven is the point. Larry Fink, let's play a hypothetical for a second. Let's say that all the Bitcoin that they have accumulated under BlackRock that they're holding for customers, right? And in their rights to preserve value on their customers' assets, right? And if they get to a certain point and the Bitcoin maximalists all unite, it's this huge battle of who holds more Bitcoin on the original chain. Well, the Bitcoin maximalists have no place to go. They will die on the original Bitcoin chain, I can assure you. Larry Fink will take all this liquidity and go, okay, fine, fork it, boom. Hard fork, every ETF Bitcoin is redeemable with X number of Bitcoin or X number of cash. And in 1 second, they can take all of that wealth off of our main chain and move it to a non-proof of work, more efficient chain that they control that more resembles a private network than it does a public distributed ledger. Like, they can do that without even blinking, and it's almost in their best interest to. That's inevitable, in my opinion, unless the liquidity that they get staying on the main net is greater, and that only is available if the Bitcoin maxis play ball. If they start hard forking or start implementing rules that go against the fundamental nature of the financial systems, like transparency, if they implemented, if the Bitcoin maxis tomorrow implemented the same protocol that some of these other chains have implemented to make it a privacy coin, for example, it would be a deal killer. Larry Fink and them would move forward without a blink. They would be Bitcoin would survive.
Yeah.
But they would redefine it the way they want it, and they would control it absolutely. And they would kill everybody that was left on that original chain just by bad publicity and regulation is the point. So to think that, there's this altruistic narrative that says that everybody in the world is going to own Bitcoin and be using it as their base currency and forget all fiat sovereign to the nations that you live in. It's It's absolutely ludicrous from my vantage point, but correct.
Yeah, and for
I will
me,
stand corrected if I am wrong.
well, or sit corrected, right?
Yeah, or sit corrected.
But as for me, I mean, when it comes to the whole fiat argument, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to have to pay my bills in Bitcoin. I would much
Exactly.
rather prefer to pay my bills in fiat. Debase the hell out of it. Let me pay my debt in those cheaper future dollars.
Yeah.
And then let me hold on to my Bitcoin so I don't have to do that. I mean, that to me, that's the beauty of it. That's the fantastic point.
But that what you just described is it's a hard place for a lot of people to get to. They don't understand I mean, you know how many people, I mean, I just want you to think about when the Bitcoin maximalists had their opportunity to be on national television to highlight the ex-president of the United States using Bitcoin, they decided to buy a cheeseburger with it. I mean, come on. I mean, no beef against cheeseburgers, as you can tell. I love them, but like, if we're going to prove the point of how valuable Bitcoin is, it's not at the cash register handling pet purchases. Like, that's ridiculous. It's not what Larry Fink's using it for. I'll put it that way. Why wouldn't we highlight what he's using it for? Like, there's a million ways to come up with that. I'm not smart enough to do it on the fly, but marketing companies could definitely come up with a better shtick to put on Fox News than him buying cheeseburgers and it taking forever and it looking like a gross failure from a tech perspective. Like, come on.
Yeah, not the best thing there. Now, some we've kind of talked about, kind of kind of went on time and time again in the past years. This idea that I think we're all in agreement that, generally speaking, government is going to push toward less self custody, more get off that self custody thing. So, are you guys thinking? So, we're getting that way. What do you guys think? Does self custody Bitcoin, does that start commanding a higher price at some point in the future than non self custodied Bitcoin?
Well, therein lies the tension of what the potential fork would be about, right? Because there are, for example, let me give you a real life example of this. ETF volume continues to increase, right? Supply stays the same, decreases because that supply has to feed the increase. So if the ETFs continue to increase and the people who started Bitcoin at the very beginning, who are holding huge supplies of it, the people who got in, 7, 8, 10 years ago, they're going to have to come off the Bitcoin, or the price will just keep going higher, or it will get to a point where the price isn't justified for the amount of supply or liquidity that's in the market, right? And when there's pinched liquidity, it's as dangerous on the negative side as it is exciting on the positive side. It's like a well losing pressure. You may be able to put the pump down in the bore and get twice as much production after you do it, but you've shut down a producing well to do it, and you may not get it producing again. There's always that risk. And so this is the same type of thing. Is like every innovation, every part of Bitcoin that we change going forward is adding risk to the table. At some point, we're going to have to call it quits and just call it the store of value that it is, right? And then that doesn't mean that it's lost its glamour. To me, it's actually now joined the big leagues, like we've talked about with real estate and gold and silver, all the mainstay stores of wealth that have been deemed that since the dawn of time. If we fast forward 100 years, and if technology goes where we all know it's going to go, SHA-256 won't even be around. It won't even be a valid encryption technology then. Like, so if you want Bitcoin to last the test of time, it won't be on the back of the technology. It won't be on the back of its use case for buying hamburgers in a bar. It will be on the back of the fact that Larry Fink has billions and billions of dollars of liquidity being actively sloshed around in this mechanism that we call the Bitcoin ETFs. And that market will drive the physical. So the connection between the physical and the ETFs right now is very apparent. It will become less apparent the more successful the ETFs are and the higher the price goes. Now, it does make you think that if they're going to get all of the traditionalists off all of their stacks, it's going to have to go. They're going to make it violently go up, in my estimation. And they're going to make it violently go down. And they're going to make a lot of those guys fear that it's going to go back down to $3,000 instead of $300,000. And their stack at 300,000 versus three, they're going to be doing the math every second of every day, going, do I sell? How much do I sell? And everybody that's smart in this world will be telling them, you should diversify, which means sell.
So Chris, you remember that movie Signs? You remember that movie with Mel Gibson, Signs? Remember that movie? And there's a scene in that movie where the adult uncle is sitting there with the two kids, and they all have tinfoil hats on, right? When we go through the self custody will be different, and we're chains. Everybody's burning everything down. The world's coming to an end in Bitcoin. When Tillman goes on these rants, I'm theoretically putting on my aluminum foil hat. That's what I'm doing. I'm going
to ask you a critical question, and I've known you for a long time, but did you go through the Bitcoin Cash hard
fork? Of course.
That's inevitable. It's happened before, so therefore nature repeats itself. It will happen again.
Yeah, is it possible? And there's difference between possible and probable, and there's also big differences in time frames. Like that, we're probably several years away, if not half a decade to a decade away from that potentially happening, and we're several exponents away from the price of Bitcoin going up until something like that happens, in my estimation. So, as it relates to this particular show, while those things are off into the future, sure. But the reality is that Bitcoin's going to 80 and then 100 and then probably 200K over the next 36 months, and plan accordingly. Right.
Well, I don't disagree. Like, again, Larry Fink wants as much of this as he can hold.
Correct.
That's the point. And he's going to pay for it. Why do I know the price is going to go up? Because Larry Fink can get a lot of cheap dollars and buy a lot of hard Bitcoin with it.
Right.
And,
right. And so, there would have to be a pretty remarkable confluence of events that would have to occur for Larry and the boys to basically fork Bitcoin. I've said this probably 24 times on different shows and on my own Twitter account, that we're going to get much higher prices.
Andrew, you're missing my point. They've already forked Bitcoin.
Yeah,
it's just about which liquidity pool is deeper. No. They've already forked it. You can't You can't take your ETF and go down to any exchange and say, "Hey, give me a Bitcoin for it."
Right.
That ETF represents a fork of Bitcoin, and the larger that grows, let's say the ETF Bitcoin market's worth real estate numbers, $100 trillion. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they're going to give a rip what's going on the Bitcoin network?
Well, I also think that there's a world where they can reverse the cash create mechanism, and the fact that banks will now be able to custody Bitcoin, Bank of New York Mellon being the first, and State Street and Goldman Sachs probably being the second and third, that there's a chance, if the politics plays out the way that we think it's going to over the next 60 days, there's going to be a world where that cash create gets adjusted back to in kind. All of the issuers of the spot ETFs wanted it to be in kind, but the SEC demanded that.
That's proving my point even more. If you go to in kind versus cash create, it means that they can just print Bitcoin with paper for infinity. And that is literally the hardest fork of Bitcoin that's ever existed in the course of Bitcoin. That would literally take the supply to infinity. Instead of 21 million at the bottom, we'd have an infinity symbol. And so that's my point, is liquidity defines the market. And
Mhm.
we're in this holy grail inception phase where we have a legacy system paired with a new world system, these financial products. And there will be a clash of those titans unless they can drive the price to a point where they control 80% of the supply. And at that point, they don't care anymore. They determine what owning a Bitcoin looks like, and it may never be holding a Bitcoin in cold storage. You may not get credit for that going forward because they may hold so much that at a certain point they go, you know what? Anyone who doesn't have it onboarded on our system right now, who
Mhm.
cares? Just cut them off as a loss leader. We've got our existing system up and running. We hold now.
Yeah.
If we cut them off,
Yeah.
we hold 100% of the Bitcoin supply now.
Well, I think it makes sense that while these, ideas and thought processes again are a possibility. I harken back to like Jan Van Eck, who thinks that we're going to get to 300K plus in Bitcoin price before we have to be concerned about these particular issues.
I don't
So,
disagree with that. I think it's even
yeah,
higher than that. But
yeah,
I don't
so
think I think that could happen quicker than we all
yeah,
think. I mean, I think
yeah,
it'll happen in our lifetime is the point.
sure. So it's just it's a process by which possibilities versus probabilities
Yeah.
um, are different things, but at the same time, you have to be cognizant of them. And what I was about to say is that I've said time and time again, I think short and medium term, which is 12 to 36 months, I think BlackRock becoming potentially, they're already one of the three largest holders of Bitcoin, them becoming the second or even the first is a good thing short and medium term. Long term, that's a problem. I mean, long term, it's a problem in terms of the all the things that Tillman's talking about.
Well, I don't think it's a problem unless you refuse to get off the train. If at some point in the future, Larry Fink is saying, hey, listen, if you're left self custody, it's going to be illegal. If the government makes it illegal to self custody your Bitcoin, you
Mhm,
should probably think about cashing into the system, is all I'm saying,
mhm,
because they can shut the door and tell you, we don't care if you hold what you hold in Bitcoin. It's too late, essentially. We've created, because one thing I've learned about digital assets, and if you want to go prove this point, go mess on the Solana meme coin train. You can print the exact same thing tomorrow.
mhm.
There's nothing that keeps me from literally starting a new Bitcoin tomorrow and
Yeah.
telling you guys, hey, I'm Satoshi 2.0. This is Bitcoin 2.0.
Mhm.
And guess what? If I'm able to pour more than, $1.4 trillion of liquidity onto my network, I win.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Real
it,
quick.
it it goes to the truth that you know the entirety of the financial system is based on some level of theoretical trust, right?
Correct. And the
That
people who
you know,
provide the liquidity to it.
it's like people that ask the question, well, what is the dollar backed by? And then somebody will send you pictures of the military planes and aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Well,
Um,
it's backed by groceries in the refrigerator. It's backed by the fact that everybody here that I need anything from takes it. And that's being an American, right?
mhm, mhm,
And so they're never going to get rid of but here's the point. Commodities all have to play. What's the dog and what's the tail? Is the dog fiat and the tail commodities, or is the tail commodities and the dog fiat? Which one's which? Well, through the means of military might, control, and national security, fiat controls everything,
yeah.
right?
Mhm,
Right. So everything's denominated in fiat. Even the way we judge how good Bitcoin is all based upon how much fiat we can get for it. Think about
yeah.
that.
Right.
So if we are innately that, the is the government going to allow our children's children to price everything in Bitcoin? The answer is no,
Right.
because they cannot print more Bitcoin. And that's a fundamental characteristic of fiat that's necessary for economic growth and for function. So, like, it always is going to be the tail and never the dog. And the part of it is like how big a part of the tail do we want to be? And if we can unite around the fact that a bank holding Bitcoin and being able to borrow against it is a good thing or a better thing than our ability to say, I bought groceries with my Bitcoin and it went straight from user to user, then we can buy into a world that does include Bitcoin as a base denominated commodity is.
But it's proven that's the stupidity of those transactions, unless there's just some material change in the quote unquote, price of Bitcoin, has proven itself to be dumb, and dumber every time. Like, what was the
Well,
price
you've got
of
a good
Bitcoin?
pulse on
What
the
was the price
Bitcoin.
of Bitcoin when Trump bought burgers? I bet you it wasn't 68,
No, it was in the
right?
50s or
So
60,
those
low 60s.
burgers now cost 40, 30, 20% more, right? 20%
Yeah.
more than when he bought them, right?
Yeah, opportunity cost on that. Let me ask you a question, Andrew, because I know you've got a pretty good pulse on the Bitcoin community. Imagine all the hardcore original guys, right? The guys who are sitting on the biggest stacks. What price do you think they come off? What is there a uniform price that they get to where they go, I need to be rich in fiat now too? Or is that what have you thought about that? Because like I know that psychologically speaking, 100,000 has to feel really good to a lot of those guys. I mean, if you were one of
Well,
those guys that bought
I,
in at $1 and you were now
if you haven't thought about that, then you're not paying attention to the way that markets work. And here's the best way to say it. You can't be buying spot Bitcoin ETFs, can't be buying $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and it not coming from anywhere. Someone is selling their Bitcoin to them. Someone somewhere is doing that. That they have to be, or else they can't get it from anywhere. So, my thoughts are is it's probably a 50-50 proposition. I think people that are in that particular group, right? Let's call it the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. It's probably a 50-50 proposition. They probably have a number in their heads where they can hit the exits. And then there's 50% that are like, I'm never selling my Bitcoin. I'm never selling it. I made that decision back when it was at 18,000 and I held from the time it was at 300. I'm just never selling, right? Because if my cost basis is 300 and it returns to 3,000, I'm still worth whatever the number is, and I don't need to worry about anything anyway.
Well, and if they cashed out 50%, God help them if they blew all that.
Well, see, there's just such, there's sea change type of what ifs, at any point. Like, what if again, we have a sweeping election, which Stanley Druckenmiller is now in quotes saying that the markets are pricing in a Trump win, right? And we're 20 some days out. So let's make that assumption. Let's also make the assumption that the Senate and the House are also Republican controlled. Do we get a Bitcoin strategic reserve that's at least reasonably meaningful? Does that potentially?
I should tell you, they should at least put somebody in place that knows what the heck they're doing when selling it, if ever selling it, because they already hold billions of dollars worth from the Mount Gox and some of the other things. I mean,
So there's worlds where that postpones potentially the the fork possibilities that you talk about. Doesn't necessarily take it off the chessboard. It just postpones it probably. There's just a lot of different versions.
See, I think it's already there. I think Larry Fink and them have turned on a new spigot of liquidity out in the desert called the Bitcoin ETFs. And you're right. The rules now are cash in kind, right? They could change that, but that would only allow them more liquidity out in the desert, right? They're creating a new system of wealth that's going to be on the back of people who held ETFs from the beginning, right? And not Bitcoin from the beginning. The question will be is how do they induce the hardcore guys to sell if they continue, like when they reach the point where they go, where the volume's drying up, people aren't willing to buy it at that price, right? And at the same time, the supply's drying up. is working against you. At that point, I would think that they would have to go to, they would get off the cash system, and that's when essentially they would just pump a ton of
If Trump wins and we go into we have a phase of hyperbolic, let's call it Bitcoin growth. We have a little example of that's happening right now, and I'll tell you what it is. So Bitwise started as a crypto native ETF company, and they fought and worked and fought and worked and fought and worked. They just passed 5 billion in assets under management. You know how fast they went from 2 billion to 5 billion? Basically in the last 9 months. Why? Because of their spot Bitcoin ETF offering, right? So they've existed for, let's call it, I don't know, 6-7 years, and it took 7 years to get to 2 billion. It's taken them 9 months to get to 5. So there's a world where there's, hyperbolic adjustments in asset totalities across different different types of organizations, whether it's a Bitcoin native organization, whether it's somebody carrying it on their balance sheet, whether it's people new to carrying it on their balance sheet. And even if we get to 100 and then we get to a Jan Van Eck number of 300 plus, 100 to 300, that's a 3x, right? That's a meaningful adjustment to the upside that, just like Bitwise, makes an enormous difference in your standing as a financial entity of any
Well,
kind.
it's the power law, right? It takes us to like that 250 to 350 number, which is, kind of what everybody agrees would be a cycle high for this go around. I think some people say it could be price discovery could push it up to 500K. But that's the fun of price discovery. You never know.
Yeah, you just don't know. Yeah, you just don't know. I mean, look what happened yesterday. It pushed to 68 and then immediately dropped down to under 65, but it's trickle back up.
Well, it went from 68 down to like 61, and then immediately popped back up. I mean, it was down. It definitely, somebody sold off a big chunk in a very short period of time, but the market ate it up and then kept gobbling, and kept climbing. It's going to be interesting to see as we crack against this all-time high with the election cycle and everything. Like there's a high chance that this could be the cycle. I mean, this could be the pump. I guess.
Well, as you were saying earlier, you said that you were not, you can't print any more Bitcoin. You can't create any more Bitcoin. But we're going to say congratulations to Andrew for creating another life. He's on Team Elon, trying to help populate the world one child at a time.
Indeed.
So, congratulations, man. We didn't get a chance to say it last time. But,
thank you. By the way, there will be an announcement coming later this week. I am to find out what kind of life I have created here. So
you're not. Yeah, so you're going to find out. You're going to get the.
Well, I mean, I'm not really in charge of that decision. Like, do we find out or not find out? I don't. Yeah. So, but we will be finding out here this week, and I'm very excited about it.
Nice.
Very cool, man. Yeah. So definitely congratulations, man.
Thank you.
I think all three of us here are very big proponents of, family is life. I don't. It's hard for me to imagine what other better reason could you have for growing older other than to create family and to create new life and to raise that new life to hopefully do the right things in the world, and to not be swayed by whatever the thought of the day is. There are some timeless ideas when it comes to, what you should be doing with life, I believe. And so, hopefully everybody that's watching along here kind of feels that same way, because, at the end of the day, if we look at it, we look at Japan, we look at China, we look at everybody, even the US, this population growth is declining and even gone negative in some places. And what the hell are we talking about today? If y'all are out there doing your part and keeping things going. There won't be anything to talk about in 200 years from now, right? So, exciting times for sure. And I know we'll all be looking forward to seeing the pictures of the little one once they enter the world. So exciting, man.
If you're brave
Josh,
enough to have kids, you're brave enough to look in a mirror pretty much every day of your life, because they're a reflection of you and what you put into them as a vessel. And so if you think about your legacy as a human being, you can build statues of yourself. You can pass on, anything physical is going to deteriorate over time, but the characteristics that you build into your children are then passed to their children and their children, and they almost live on forever. Like it's part of you that you've got to be proud of, for generations after generations. So yeah, congrats, Andrew. Big deal.
And Nathan, congrats to you too. Looks like you've got a child coming in due in January.
Nice.
Nice.
Mark says, name the child Satoshi.
Not gonna happen.
We're beers and Bitcoin guys, but I don't think we're gonna go quite that. I think
Andrew Jr. is a possibility. Andrew Jr.
Andrew Jr.
Clearly on the
that
list.
was on the tip of my tongue, is what I thought you'd say.
Oh man. But yeah, so I mean, when you think about it, guys, when you think about it, Bitcoin is life, right? Bitcoin is about doing better for yourself and for your family. Life is about, creating family, about coming together, about, like Tillman was saying, passing on the things that hopefully the best parts of you, passing them on to your kids, and then they can go and pass them on to their grandkids or to their kids and your grandkids and whatnot as we go through there. So I think family and Bitcoin is a great combination. I'm not shaming anybody out there that chooses to be single. I'm just saying, man, I think y'all really don't know what you're missing out on. Not that kids are simple or they're easy, but I'll be damned if they aren't worth it. So,
for sure.
Middle name Crypto Chewy then. Oh my God. Anyway, listen. So, man, absolutely fantastic show as always. And Tillman, I said, before the show that you had a lot of people that were really enjoying you and they were like fans. And I think you've pushed a few of them away today. So you did your job.
It's my goal. I got to stay, a little bit antagonistic. Okay. That's, we need a thesis, antithesis, hero, villain, that type of
and realistic thought too at the end of the day. I mean, again, for those that maybe haven't been watching along, that don't know our backgrounds, I've been in the markets for 30 years. Andrew's got great TradFi background, and then Bitcoin here as well. Andrew and Tillman are founders of Arch Public, so be sure you check out their company, guys. Tryarchpublic.com. Did I get that right?
TheArchPublic.com. TryArchPublic is our Twitter handle.
TryArchPublic is Twitter, yes.
And listen, I'm not anybody who took offense to what I said regarding Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. You know that.
Exactly.
But I will tell you this. I've learned this, and until proven otherwise, I'm going to stick to this thesis. He who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah.
And when the financial network and the system of the ETFs and what they've built with kind of this new set of rails becomes the larger portion of the liquidity that's associated with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter what the maxis say, they're going to control the rules. And that's all I'm saying.
Well, and again, that's the same thing I've been saying for a few years here. We need maxis. When you've got new technology, when you've got some new thoughts, some new idea coming out, you need the maxis to push it, to keep it pushing, to keep people going, wait, what? But ultimately, the maximalism has to die out if you want some sort of large adoption of that idea.
There's somebody that we all know on this call, Caitlin Long, who's done remarkable work to create the initial.
I gotta jump, guys.
All right, see ya. And she effectively agrees with Tillman long term that she's been bitten so badly by the machine that is the cabal that runs banking here in this country, that her concern is that BlackRock becomes the largest holder of Bitcoin. She doesn't like that. She doesn't like it, and she's not come out and said that in a huge public way. But she shared that with me privately, and she says she's as sharp as they come in terms of banking and Bitcoin and TradFi in the space. So so it's well worth watching is the point.
Yeah. And to finish out, Tillman, I was going to say, guys, Tillman definitely has a background in Bitcoin. I know somebody earlier had said he doesn't seem to know anything about it, but he ran a pretty big mining thing himself back in the
in 2013 and 14. So literally a decade ago, he was running
back in the beginning
a huge amount of Bitcoin miners. So he knows more about Bitcoin in terms of the technology and the ethos and the philosophy of Bitcoin than I ever will. And so, listen, I think his thoughts are remarkably valuable. And I think there's a world where his possibilities are on the table. My point is just simply we're years away from that, and so people can benefit from the freedom money idea of Bitcoin, as well as the price appreciation of Bitcoin as an asset.
Exactly.
Honestly, his possibility is no different than everybody that owns a piece of real estate now has to pay taxes on it, or if you don't pay the taxes, the government's going to seize your property.
Yeah.
Right. So do you stop buying property because of that? No, you don't.
Right. Exactly. Man, always so great to have you guys joining me here on Wednesdays, man. Listen, if you haven't yet, make sure you guys are following Andrew, AP_Abacus on Twitter. You can follow me at TX West Capital. And of course, you can follow Tillman there at Texas OL 61. And once again, be sure you check out their company there at thearchpublic.com. And you can follow their company account there at TryArchPublic on Twitter. And hey, if you want to check out as well, go check out TexasWestCapital.com/9, 7, the letter G for good, the letter C for Christopher. And I don't believe you'll be sorry that you did on that. We've all got big things coming out here. Definitely pay attention to these guys with Arch Public. They got something coming out on my birthday next month. I'm trying to get them to name it the Inks Algo. Okay. I'm working on this. You guys help me out, get them to do this, or at least the Beard Algo. I mean, we can do with that as well. But be sure you guys are watching for that next month as well with these guys. Okay. As always, remember the only thing you control in the markets is how much you lose. So what we try to do here is not necessarily hang around price as much as it is to look at Bitcoin as an asset class, what it means to the future, what are the possibilities. We don't have crystal balls, but we do have a lot of varied experience in markets and whatnot. Just try to give you guys maybe some things that you're not hearing out there in the echo chamber that is, the Bitcoin maximalism and Bitcoin kind of echo chambers out there, just to, once again, help you understand the product better. All right. So there we go. That's good. Y'all have a great day. Trade safe. We'll see y'all back online there. Andrew, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Always appreciate you guys being here. And let's see if we can get out of here easier than I did last time. That was
all right. You guys have a great week.
Take care, man.
All right.
Take care.